You know me as Lady Gaga, sold out stadiums, meat dresses, and Super Bowl halftime shows. But before the applause, before the fame, I was just Stefani, a teenage girl in Yonkers with calloused fingers from late-night piano practice and dreams that didn't fit inside our cramped apartment. My sister Natalie, she got the world handed to her on a silver tray. Private art tutors, summer programs in Florence, and week-long retreats in the Hamptons for inspiration. Me? I worked the front counter at a neighborhood diner after school and tutored younger kids for spare cash. My weekends weren't spent at galleries. I was scrubbing tables and balancing trays, chasing tips just to keep my keyboard from getting sold in a yard sale. I wasn't jealous, not exactly, but it stung, the way my parents looked at her art portfolio with stars in their eyes. While treating my music like a hobby I'd grow out of, I'd play for them. They'd nod, distracted, then ask if I'd thought more about becoming a teacher. Back then, the idea of becoming Lady Gaga felt ridiculous, even to me, but something inside me refused to let go. If no one else believed I could be more, then I'd believe enough for everyone. The first job was after school, cashiering at a bakery where the owners barely spoke English and paid me under the table. The second was weekend shifts waiting tables at a downtown diner. And the third, well, that was the hardest. Playing piano at a smoky Italian restaurant on Saturday nights, pretending not to hear drunk men call me sweetheart while I sang Billy Joel covers and prayed the mic wouldn't cut out. I never told my parents how exhausted I was, how sometimes I fell asleep on the train home and missed my stop. I didn't complain when my sister flew to Paris for an artist-in-residence program our parents funded, or when they renovated her room while I shared mine with laundry baskets and sheet music. They said I was strong, that I didn't need help like Natalie did. But being strong isn't the same as being supported. It means surviving in silence while everyone celebrates someone else. What they didn't realize was that every latte I poured, every burnt fingertip from playing piano in that freezing restaurant, it was all adding up. They thought I was just getting by, but I was building something, quietly, fiercely. And one day, they'd hear me loud and clear. The notice was taped to the back of a juice bar. Open call, female singers for off-Broadway showcase. Raw talent, no agents, no cost. Bring your own music. It felt like a scam, but I took the flyer anyway. That night, I ironed my only black dress, practiced in the apartment stairwell while my mom yelled at me to keep it down, and took 2 trains across the city. I didn't have sheet music, so I brought my worn-down notebook, the same one I used to write lyrics during midnight shifts. They gave each girl 60 seconds. Some forgot lyrics, others froze. But when my name was called, something in me snapped awake. I sat at the piano, hands trembling, and sang something I wrote when I was 17, after cleaning hotel bathrooms in Queens. When I finished, the room was silent. Not cold, just quiet, like they were still listening even after I'd stopped. A woman in a red coat leaned forward. "You wrote that?" she asked. I nodded. She smiled. "Stay after." That night, I walked home alone. No applause, no trophy, just the distant hum of subway tracks and the weight of a maybe in my chest. But for the first time, I felt seen. Not as a strong one, just as me. 2 days later, my sister came back from Morocco, sun-kissed, barefoot, and laughing like nothing in the world could touch her. She dumped her luggage in the hallway, pulled out a camera roll, and started showing Mom the photos. Camel rides, desert resorts, rooftop dinners. They crowded around the kitchen table, passing prints like postcards. I stood in the doorway, hands still raw from the double shift, apron folded under my arm. No one asked where I'd been. No one noticed the bruise on my wrist from dropping a crate of wine bottles, or the fact that I hadn't slept more than 4 hours in days. My sister looked up and smiled. "You should come next time," she said. I almost laughed. Next time? I couldn't even afford a cab home, let alone a plane ticket to Marrakesh. My mom chimed in. "You'd love it there, sweetheart. Just imagine the culture." I did imagine. But in my version, I wasn't sipping cocktails. I was working room service and folding towels while they lived the dream on someone else's dime. I walked past them quietly, opened the bedroom door, and shut it without a word. Inside, I turned on the lamp, pulled out my notebook, and started writing again. Because the world might not have space for girls like me, but I'd carve one anyway. I worked mornings at the coffee shop, evenings at the bookstore, and weekends cleaning houses in the Upper East Side. My life moved in hours, not days, measured by blisters, bus rides, and the sound of clocks ticking on beige walls. Every dollar went toward the dream. Acting classes when I could afford them. Second-hand scripts I read under a flickering lamp. I even auditioned for student films, sometimes landing a line, sometimes just a door slammed in my face. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, rehearsing monologues until my throat went dry. I wasn't chasing fame. I was chasing freedom. I didn't want red carpets. I wanted rent money and a name that couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, my sister planned her next trip, Greece this time. Mom helped her pack again. Dad smiled like nothing was wrong. No one asked if I had eaten. No one noticed that my shoes had holes in them. No one cared that the girl mopping office floors at 2 a.m. was their daughter too. But I kept going. Not because I was strong, but because quitting would have made their silence true. And I refused to let them be right. It was a Tuesday night. I'd just finished my third shift, hands aching, eyes burning, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Hi, is this Stefani Germanotta?" the voice asked. Polite, warm, unfamiliar. I straightened up. "Yes, this is Leslie Monroe from the Lincoln Performing Arts Center. We'd like to offer you a spot in our fall workshop. Full scholarship. A donor saw your monologue tape and insisted we reach out." For a second, I thought it was a prank. But then she named the scene I'd performed, the one I'd recorded on a borrowed camera, uploaded at the public library, and sent off without hope. I dropped onto the bus stop bench, shaking, not from cold, from disbelief. No one in my family had called me talented. No one had told me I was worth investing in. But a stranger did, and that was enough to ignite something. Later that night, I walked into my tiny apartment and stared at myself in the mirror. I was still broke, still invisible to the people who raised me, but something had shifted. For the first time, the world had spoken back, and it hadn't said no. The Lincoln Center wasn't glamorous behind the scenes. The hallways smelled like old paint and wet carpet. The rehearsal spaces were drafty. But to me, it was a palace. The other students had shiny resumes, private schools, rich parents, real headshots. I had none of that, but I had grit. And something else, hunger. I showed up early, stayed late, memorized every line, even the ones that weren't mine. While the others laughed and went out for drinks, I mopped the floors of a diner to cover subway fare. I told no one. I wanted to be judged by what I gave on stage, not by what I lacked off it. One night, I stayed behind after rehearsal to practice a scene. Alone in the dark auditorium, I stood under the spotlight and delivered the monologue from Antigone, like it was the only thing keeping me alive. When I finished, slow applause echoed from the back. A woman emerged, gray-haired, elegant, intense. "I've directed here for 20 years, she said. "And I don't say this often, but you don't act the part. You are the part." My throat tightened. No one in my family had ever said I was great. Now a stranger had. And for the first time, I believed it. After that night, everything shifted. The director, her name was Marianne, took me under her wing. She helped me get a scholarship, vouched for me at auditions, even let me crash in the theater's prop room when I couldn't afford rent. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I landed my first off-Broadway role 6 months later. It was a small part, 2 lines, no name, but it felt like a universe opening. I called my parents that night, told them about the show, invited them, twice. My mother paused. "That's great, sweetie, but your sister just booked a modeling shoot in Capri. Isn't that exciting?" I forced a smile into the phone. "Yeah, that's amazing." My dad muttered something about the cost of flights and how maybe next time they'd come see me. There was always a next time. That never came. Opening night, I looked out into the crowd. Row after row of strangers, no family, no applause from the people I once wanted most to hear it from. After the curtain call, while the others hugged friends and posed for pictures, I sat in the dressing room alone, still in costume, still hoping. But something in me hardened that night. If I was going to rise, it wouldn't be with them clapping behind me. It would be in spite of their silence. The gigs got better, the rooms got bigger. But I never forgot the feeling of performing for a crowd of strangers while my own family looked the other way. I threw myself into every note like it was the only thing keeping me alive, because some days it was. I worked weekends at a diner near the theater, double shifts, burned hands from hot plates, tips barely enough to cover rent. Then I'd rush to rehearsal, wiping syrup off my apron backstage, pretending I belonged in a world that didn't even know my name yet. But I kept showing up, because if I didn't, who would? Meanwhile, I'd see photos of my sister on yachts, in silk robes, under Mediterranean sunsets. She looked free, effortless, sponsored. And still, my parents never once asked if I needed help. Not financially, not emotionally. Nothing. I wasn't jealous. I was just forgotten. One night after a late shift, I sat alone in the theater balcony, lights off, humming the melody of a song I hadn't written yet, one that burned in my chest like truth. It hit me then. They didn't get to define me. Their silence didn't mean I was nothing. It meant I'd have to be everything, on my own. A week later, everything changed because of a power outage. The theater lost electricity mid-rehearsal. Everyone packed up to leave, but I stayed. I don't know why. Maybe I liked how the silence made me feel bigger than the walls that had always boxed me in. I started singing in the dark, just me, no lights, no crowd, just a raw voice echoing off velvet curtains and wooden beams. What I didn't know was that someone else had stayed too. Mr. Donatelli, one of the older producers, had come back to grab his briefcase. He heard me, and he didn't say anything until I finished. When the lights flickered back on, he stood at the aisle's edge and said 6 words I'll never forget. You shouldn't be waiting tables forever. 2 weeks later, I had an audition. A real one. Not for background roles or unpaid showcases, but for a lead in an off-Broadway production. I didn't tell my parents or my sister. It felt like something sacred, like mine. That first callback, I sang like my entire life depended on it. Because in many ways, it did. And for the first time, I felt it. Not fame, not money, just the sound of being seen. Opening night came faster than I expected. It wasn't a Broadway stage. No celebrity audience. Just a dusty theater with a squeaky spotlight and maybe 50 folding chairs. But to me, it was the world. I had one solo, just 90 seconds. But I rehearsed it like it was the Grammys. I didn't invite my parents. I didn't think they'd come. And I was right. As I stepped onto the stage, I looked into the dim crowd and saw strangers sipping plastic cups of wine. Not a single familiar face. Still, I sang, like my soul had been waiting years for that moment. And when I finished, there was silence, then polite applause. No one stood up, no one cried, but I did, quietly backstage. Because for the first time, I hadn't performed for approval. I'd done it for me. The next morning, I returned to the diner. Same apron, same orders, same tiny tips. But something had shifted. When my sister posted another photo, her in Santorini, some infinity pool behind her, I didn't feel bitter. I felt powerful. Because I wasn't escaping life through pictures. I was building one song at a time. And even if no one noticed yet, I did. A few weeks later, I saved enough to attend an open mic night in Manhattan. It wasn't glamorous. It was a narrow basement bar where the mic squeaked. The piano was out of tune, and half the audience was too drunk to listen. But I stood there anyway. I introduced myself, nervous, heart pounding, said I had a song I'd written myself. Someone in the back chuckled. Another girl with a dream, I heard a man mutter. I could have left. Instead, I sang louder. I poured every shift, every ignored voicemail, every ache from my feet into that melody. And when I was done, no one laughed. They clapped. Afterward, a producer approached me. Not a big name, just someone running an indie studio out of Brooklyn. But he said one thing I never forgot. You sound like someone who's been told no her whole life and kept singing anyway. That night, I walked 10 blocks home in the cold. No coat, no heels, just joy. Not because I'd made it, but because I'd been heard. And maybe, just maybe, that little fire I kept alive in secret, it was finally starting to catch. Not long after that night, things moved fast. I recorded 2 demos with the Brooklyn producer. He paid me in slices of pizza and Subway tokens, but I didn't care. My voice was finally on tape. My dream had a sound. One afternoon, I mailed a copy home. No note, no explanation. Just the CD and my name scribbled on it. I didn't expect anyone to listen. A week later, I got a voicemail from my mom. Her voice was quiet. "Your father heard it first," she said. "He played it at dinner. Your sister cried. We didn't know it hurt you that much." I stood frozen in the corner of my room, phone pressed to my ear. Part of me wanted to scream, "Of course it hurt." But another part, an older part, just exhaled. Maybe they didn't understand, but they heard me now. Later that month, I was invited to sing at a local charity gala. Nothing fancy, but my name, Stefani Germanotta, was printed in bold on the flyer. That flyer made its way into my parents' kitchen, onto their fridge. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Sometimes you don't need an apology. You just need to know they finally saw you. The night of the gala, I wore a dress I'd found at a thrift store for $8 and stitched the torn hem myself. My makeup was uneven, hands shaking too much to draw a straight line, but I felt beautiful because I was walking into a room as me. The room was warm, glowing with cheap fairy lights and nervous energy. Local artists, teachers, small business owners filled the chairs. I wasn't the headliner, just one voice on the list. But I was ready. When my name was called, I walked up slowly, took the mic, closed my eyes, and then I saw them. My parents, standing in the back. My mom in a too formal dress. My dad holding his baseball cap in both hands like a peace offering. My sister wasn't with them. Maybe that was for the best. I didn't stop singing, but I did sing differently. Louder, clearer. Every lyric stitched with the pieces of my story. I saw my father wipe his eyes. My mother held his arm. And for the first time, I wasn't chasing their attention. They came to me. After the show, they waited quietly by the exit. No grand speeches, just my mom saying, "We're proud," and my dad whispering, "I'm sorry it took so long." I didn't cry when they said it. Not then. I just nodded, thanked them politely, and walked home alone through the cold. Because their words, while overdue, didn't change the journey I had walked to get here. Back in my tiny apartment, I placed the flower a student had handed me on the windowsill. The sink was still full of dishes. The ceiling still leaked near the radiator, but I smiled because I finally knew what freedom felt like. A few weeks later, I was invited to perform at a bigger venue, this time paid. A reporter asked me how it felt to finally be recognized. I told her the truth. Recognition didn't come from applause. It came the night I cleaned hotel bathrooms and sang into a mop handle. It came the morning I chose rent over rest. It came the moment I stopped waiting for someone else to lift me up. My parents call now. They show up sometimes. And while I've let them back into my life, I don't need them to complete it. Because I learned something through every sleepless night and every ignored audition. You don't have to be chosen to matter. You just have to keep showing up, even when no one claps. And I did. That's how I became Lady Gaga.